Response, rather, to the address by King Charles III in a joint meeting. There he is greeting, he and his wife, the Queen, greeting the chairman and members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as members of the U.S. Supreme Court. There he is saying hello to former Justice Stephen Breyer. A very rousing speech. No booze, as opposed to other speeches we hear in that chamber sometime. By Americans. Let us get some reaction. David Chalian, there were some items in that speech that I think it's fair to say were included that, you know, are, I wouldn't call them zingers against President Trump, but points of disagreement.
And did not hide from them at all. I mean, I think it was a speech that was putting democratic values, the rule of law, the power of alliances, even a specific on the support of Ukraine's defense. These stand in complete opposition. And in fact, some of them are the very things that Donald Trump sort of rails against when he's complaining about Europe or the UK specifically. Now, King Charles doesn't come in here itching for a fight on it. He comes in with his position to be above it a bit, and in his, very British, stiff upper lip kind of way. It's not that he was trying to get in a fight with President Trump, but he couldn't have seized the opportunity more to really stand clear on the importance of these things with a value system underneath it that is in contrast to a lot of what Donald Trump has been presenting on the world stage as it comes to these alliances.
Jamie?
Yeah, so to your point about booze, I may have lost count, but I think 6 or 7 standing ovations, including a very long one. It's been a long time since I think in that chamber we have seen this kind of enthusiasm. Just to add to what David said about something that, President Trump doesn't like to talk about a lot, King Charles talked a lot about the environment and nature. And he said from the depths of the Atlantic, so he was talking about NATO, but he even worked in the words to the disastrously melting ice caps of the Arctic. And he brought it back over and over again. The other thing that I would say is just on a lighter note, he was absolutely charming throughout the whole thing. He talked about his 5 times great-grandfather, King George. He talked about
the Mad King.
And
just to be precise about which king we're talking about.
This
King
was,
George we're talking about. Yeah.
And about he said, I'm not part of some rear guard action.
250 years later, after
exactly.
we beat the Brits, yes, making sure we don't think he's a sleeper cell.
Right.